Ayurveda it's the art of longevity, because it's using things to enhance our quality of life and a longer lifespan through herbal medicine, nature, self-help, things that you're learning to kind of balance out the body, because Ayurveda is about balance. And it's strictly simple treatments just to keep the body at harmony.
The big question is this: how do we take a seemingly ordinary world and make it beyond extraordinary? In yoga, there is so much more than meets the eye, and it's not just the things we do on our yoga mats that make the biggest difference. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name is Austin Bitsis, and welcome to Life as a Secret Yogi. We have Wesley Pilcher on the show today. He is a wellness consultant and co-owner of the Arkansas Yoga Collective. Wesley has received certifications in Chinese herbology, Ayurvedic medicine, and aromatherapy. He has completed a 6-month internship with Dr. Murta Champa, a Tibetan and Ayurvedic healer. Wesley is also a certified yoga teacher in Dynamic Hatha Yoga and received 2 teaching certifications in mixed martial arts. For all you loyal listeners, if his last name sounds familiar, that's because his amazing wife, Sarah Pilcher, was featured in episode 11. So definitely check that out. And that episode was on yoga with multiple sclerosis and its benefits for autoimmune disease. But today we have Wesley on the show today to unpack the topic of Ayurveda. So Wesley, welcome to Life as a Secret Yoga podcast, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you very, very much. It's an honor to be here. So my quick story on how I got to Ayurveda is I personally was a kind of sickly child, ended up having celiac, and that was pretty much the only thing that was wrong with me. I had really bad allergies from it and all this other stuff, and I was super thin. I found out I had celiac when I was in my late 20s because I didn't even know what that was. And so my journey wellness was I worked for, there's a little mom and pop health food store called Beans and Grains and Things. It doesn't exist anymore. They got bought out by Wild Oats and then Whole Foods eventually. But I worked in the supplement and health food industry for 15 years. And so I learned a lot about vitamins and herbs and stuff like that to kind of help with the company and also to heal my body and all that. So I found out from my sister, she took the first test and it's pretty genetic, celiac is. So she had it and I was like, yes, I know what's wrong. And so I started to get off wheat and all that stuff and actually started to gain weight and all that. So I weighed about 120 my whole life until recently, like 10 years ago. I started gaining a little weight. I'm at good weight right now, but I was super skinny. And that led me into deciding to take a course in naturopath. So my background is mainly Eastern medicine. That's what I studied. So that's where Ayurveda came in, especially with starting yoga. I started yoga about 18 or 19, and I'm 45. I just turned 45. So I've been practicing a long time and teaching a long time. And so just my opinion, and doesn't work with everybody, but I think as a yoga teacher and somebody who runs a teacher training program, I think it's very important that yoga teachers know Ayurveda. I think it's a great tool to teach group classes and to teach privates and stuff like that, because you start to get to know some of the doshas or the characteristics of the body a lot better. So it's just really changed my life in so many different ways.
Awesome.
And to go into that, just small things that make huge differences, like learning relationships with other people. And just because they're a Vata or they're a Pitta or Kapha or whatever. So it really helps out in life in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's an awesome story. And you seem like the perfect person to break this down with. And for everyone who doesn't know what Ayurveda is and what the doshas are, we're going to break it down in this episode. So, and Wesley, a little bit about the audience. The audience are those that want to take the practice of yoga, meditation, breath work, energy work, animal assisted therapy, Ayurveda, among other related tools, into the real world. It's a lot of people who are looking to perform at a higher level in other disciplines such as running, golf, surfing, weightlifting, freediving, basketball, art, music, entrepreneurship, or so on. Or those who just want to simply just make life beautiful. And the audience does not necessarily have the desire to become the stereotypical yogi or yoga teacher. Nevertheless, the audience would like to utilize the tools of yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda, as we kind of discussed on this episode, to make life beautiful. And in short, this message of the secret yogi is that we all have this heroic self, our inner source that we cultivate through these tools, and to make a seemingly ordinary world extraordinary. It's that we all have this superhero that lives within. And yoga, meditation, breath work, and these similar practices like Ayurveda allow us to tap into our quote, quote, superpowers. Our superpowers being mindfulness, awareness, love, focus, creating happiness from within, to just list a few, but ultimately just feeling good in a body that we love. So it was amazing to hear your background. And that kind of leads us on to the topic of Ayurveda, which this whole episode's about. And for the audience that doesn't really know what Ayurveda is, or they might have kind of how I first heard of it, which was associated with diet. Like I thought it was just a diet, like Ayurvedic diet, like any other type of diet. But then I found out through taking courses and reading books that it was so much more than just simply the diet portion of it. And it's really a lifestyle. Would you be able to kind of give like a layman's term definition of what Ayurveda is?
So the translation from Sanskrit is science of life. And I like that definition, but I like to kind of change up the words a little bit because it seems that over thousands of years, because Ayurveda is, they don't know exactly how old it is, but it's 5 to 10,000 years old. So it's super old. They have one particular book, and the practitioners, the doctors of Ayurvedic medicine, have to memorize this particular book, and it's huge. So a typical Ayurvedic physician, it usually takes about 7 years to complete college with Ayurveda. It is the first system of medicine, and it's a lot of new kind of things that we use in the West. Surgery was done in Ayurveda. That's where it comes from. And so anyway, so to go back to the definition, I like to kind of say, I've heard several people say this, and I agree with it mostly, is that Ayurveda is it's the art of longevity, because it's using things to enhance our quality of life and a longer lifespan through herbal medicine, nature, self-help, things that you're learning to kind of balance out the body, because Ayurveda is about balance, and it's strictly simple treatments just to keep the body at harmony. So, for example, Ayurveda, since it's based upon the 5 elements, so how that works in the world relating to Ayurveda is that the 5 elements are outside, of course, there's water, air, fire, space, and earth. And so with the 5 elements, we have all that externally, but we also have it internally as well. And so if we can keep those at harmony, we can keep health. And so as I go into the doshas, it'll make more sense with the 5 elements. Also, there's, in Sanskrit, they call it the gunas, and that's the tendencies of kind of who we are, our being. And there's 3 of them, and I'll try to make it as easy as possible and not speak a lot of Sanskrit so everybody can kind of understand. But there's 3 tendencies that we all have as people and as objects. So there's tamas, rajas, and sattva. And so tamas is more kind of heavy, inertia, a little bit more kind of on the darker side. Like for example, since it's in everything, tamas is stuff like fast food, preservatives, things that we like to eat that's very heavy and not very good on the system, right? Mm-hmm. And rajas is more kind of active. Usually relating to food, rajas is like spicy food or caffeine or marijuana or tobacco or something that's kind of like stimulating. And sattva, even though we have all three of them, we kind of want to stay in this particular state. Sattva is the pure essence of spirituality. It's like the goodness. So everybody's trying to get to that kind of particular point in food. So for example, we talked about rajas as being spicy food and, stuff like that, active kind of stimulation. But sattvic food is more natural foods that are good for the body. So greens, fruit, veggies, whole grains, organic things, spices that are kind of not so stimulating. Supposedly, a lot of times in Ayurveda, they say garlic and onions are too stimulating for the system, which, we eat tons of garlic and onions. So it's kind of interesting to see that. So anyway, those are the tendencies that we all have. Mm-hmm. And how I like to explain it is with rajas, we get up during the day, right? And we feel good and we're happy and we move around and start drinking coffee and all that. And then the second one, we go throughout the day and we do amazing things like work and do our service work and do all this other stuff that is for a higher purpose. And that would be sattva. And when we get home, we drink a glass of wine, we take a bubble bath, we eat some food, and we go to sleep. And that's more tamas. So the heavy part, where all the senses start to shut down a little bit. So a lot of times in Ayurveda, people tend to kind of think that, okay, I just have to get to sattva, but you always have all three of them. And if you don't, and you just have sattva, which is not very likely, you'll be some enlightened being that's floating around. So you always have to have all three, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's just kind of like push and pull, like finding this balance, but also this is kind of what we'll get into, the doshas, and finding out, okay, what does my body need and what does my body need in this moment, and kind of being able to bring in self-awareness into your daily routine. Is that on the right page?
So I think it's important with people who are just learning Ayurveda to kind of get the aspect of doshas, because I think that's the most important thing. If you can get anything out of Ayurveda, doshas is really important. And it's a different aspect of how Western medicine is, because Western medicine is allopathic medicine. So it's treated the body as we're all the same. So for example, if we took Allegra D or some kind of allergy medicine that had some, so anyway, we would give it to anybody. Okay, you have allergies, so this kid can have it, this person can have it. We all take the same medicine in the Western world. In some it works for, and some people, Allegra D dries them out, they don't want to take it anymore. All of a sudden they're constipated for 3 days. It's a nightmare for them, right? So it's a little different modality to look at, because Ayurveda doesn't do that. They look at these doshas, and we'll go into them in a second, and they say, hey, you can't give this medicine to this particular person because it'll take them out of balance. So it's interesting to see, and I'm not bagging Western medicine at all, because I think Western medicine is great for things like trauma and, all kinds of surgeries and amazing stuff, amazing science that Western medicine does. But it's getting better, but it's not as good on preventative medicine. And Ayurveda is all about, let's prevent and do these things so we don't get imbalances, so we don't get disease. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I'm glad you made that clarification, where it's kind of the difference between Western and Eastern medicine, where we're talking about kind of the Ayurvedic, more Eastern medicine in terms of preventative medicine and things to do in terms of self-care before you need to kind of make those interventions. So it's interesting too how Ayurvedic kind of breaks up the individual into these things we call doshas or your constitution. And can you explain a little bit more about like the three constitutions?
So there's three body types, and I would say probably the most predominant one you see is Vata, and that's Vata. And the qualities of a Vata person are either short or tall and slender. So they have a slender build, usually skinny. They don't. It's really hard for them to gain weight. Also, on the 5 elements mode, it's represents air. So Vata represents air. So it literally means that they're airy. So it means that they're a little airheaded and a little woo, And I can say that I'm a Vata Pitta, so I can say all the things. But they're also gassy. I mean, they have stomach problems, and they tend to not have a lot of groundiness in the gut. So you really always have to think about in the doshas the balance. But going back into Vata people are really hyperactive. They have a lot of movement in them. So they're always going. Also, they go till they burn out. So that's kind of the Vata thing. Vatas don't like schedules, right? So having a schedule is just a nightmare for a Vata person. So they're very high strung, and they tend to stay up really late, don't get much sleep, stuff like that. So there's a lot of balancing that has to be done with a Vata person. They always say yes. There's no to them. You ask them, hey, do you want to help me move at 6 o'clock in the morning? Sure. They haven't even thought about what they have to do or anything. They're just yes. They're just always ready to go. So that's kind of a breakdown of Vata. They're also dry. So they have dry skin most of the time. And so there's always some kind of balance in moisture and all that. I'll go through the doshas and then we'll talk about balance a little bit. So Vata is just kind of, it's pretty predominant in the world in general. I would say it's the most popular dosha in the world.
Yeah, I think it's a great description that you gave, and kind of like a real world examples in terms of that. And I actually have a constitution test, a Ayurvedic Constitution test right in front of me right now. So for everyone that is listening to this episode, there's tons of Ayurvedic Constitution tests online, and hopefully by the time this launches, maybe I'll even have my own, which I'll link to in the descriptions below. But I mean, just some of the things like exactly like you described for Vata, it's like body size slim, weight low. I mean, it's really dry skin, thin, dry, cold, rough, dark. And these are not bad qualities. There's no good or bad. It's just things that you kind of, a way to group people into these 3 different constitutions, as they call it in Ayurveda. And you may be a mix between some. I mean, physical activity, hyperactive; mental activity, hyperactive; emotions, uncertainty; speech, rapid. And those are just some qualities. But I mean, definitely check out in further if you feel like you might be a Vata or you want to know your constitution. But thanks for clearing Vata, and we could go on to the next one.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that, Austin, about, those qualities are not necessarily bad at all. And I think it's interesting to look at, Vata as having an employee. So if you're a boss and you want to hire somebody that's a Vata, you know what their qualities are. You know that they're going to get the job done and all that, but you can only rely on them for so many hours because they're going to burn out and then, not have as much creativity. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things with Vata people is that they're very creative. So if you want somebody on your team that's super creative, you would get a Vata person. So there's just so many good qualities in a Vata person in each dosha. So anyway, and again, I'll go back to balancing a little bit in the doshas, but the second one is Pitta. And you can also, like you said, you can be double doshas. That's common, especially in the United States. But you only have one particular dosha that you're born with, your physical characteristics. So a Pitta person is more a medium build. They gain muscle pretty quickly. If you're a redhead, That's a given. You're already you're already a Pitta. It doesn't matter. And if you have some red hair, maybe in your beard or in your hair or something, you probably have some kind of Pitta constitution with whatever else you have, right? So that's a given. So you have a child or something that has red hair, they're going to be Pitta. Pitta are more, I would say, heady, very intelligent. I'm not saying this as a negative aspect. They're very judgmental in the way that they want to get things done and all that. So they're very logical and brain oriented. So that's a good thing. Again, going into the work field, you want somebody who is super smart and wants, trying to figure out some amazing math problem. You would get a Pitta person, right? Mm-hmm. Super intelligent. And so physical aspects, going back to that, fire is their element. So most of the time when they get a little bit angry because they have so much fire in them, they turn red. That's a lot of times you see somebody turn red when they get irritated or something. That's a Pitta person. So they're very oily and pungent. So what does pungent mean? Pungent means that when they sweat, they're sweaty. You can smell them. I had a teacher and one of my best friends, we'd go eat Indian food and we'd digest for a couple hours and then we'd do yoga practice together right next to each other. And I could smell the Indian food right when I was at the restaurant. It was just like the same smell. So that's a Pitta person that's pungent. So yeah, they're usually fair-skinned. They have pretty thick hair and beautiful hair and stuff like that. But Pitta person is more fiery, kind of medium build person. So that's how I would kind of break it down.
Yeah. And I think there's another great description of that. And Pittas can be more of like a fiery, hot-headed personality, extremist. Again, on terms of like a constitution test, they'll ask you stuff such as like body size, body weight, physical features such as like your chins, your cheeks, your eyes, your nose, your lips, your teeth, like just characteristics like that, and your skin and your hair, but also things like your appetite, your digestion, your taste, your thirst, your elimination, physical activity, mental activity, and like emotions, intellect, faith, dreams, sleep, speech, financial. And these are all things that kind of make up your lifestyle, and it helps you characterize yourself. Like, am I more of a Veda or a Pitta? And it kind of gives you a score, which is really cool about that. And like with anything, I mean, there's pros and cons with either, and kind of knowing what is your strengths and what is your weaknesses, but you can better define that when you do know your constitution and you're aware and mindful of, okay, these are my tendencies that are innate to me. Let me see how that, what we're kind of going to go on to is how we're going to balance that.
Yeah, and going back to digestion, we talked about the Vata person being airy and gassy and all that, but with the Pitta person, they're a little bit more acidic. So it makes sense if you think about it, because if they're more fiery, because in Ayurveda, there's this thing called Agni, and it's like the fire of the digestion. So it's always hot and ready to go. So with Pitta people, they really have to watch their appetite and their what they're eating. So if you could imagine, again, I'll go back to the foods and all that stuff, but if you can imagine, since you're so hot, the Pitta person has to eat cooling foods to kind of put out that fire a little bit. And if they have too much things that are hot, then it causes like heartburn and things like that. So it totally makes sense on each digestive kind of process. The next one is Kapha. And it's interesting in society, how we look at body types. It's interesting because with Kapha, everybody is always talking about how they don't want to be big boned and overweight and all this other stuff. Kapha people are bigger people. They have bigger bones. A lot of times they're a lot taller and stuff like that, but they are the most robust and they are the most healthy. So a Kapha person tends to be really, really healthy. The only thing about the Kapha person is the characteristic that needs to be changed is they don't like to move. They'd rather be on the couch eating potato chips and just kind of hanging out. They don't like to move. Not like the Pitta people and like the Vata people. So Kapha people are very watery. They always have some kind of sinus congestion kind of problem, and they're really nurturing and just sweet, super, super sweet people. So they're kind of a bigger, they're the bigger constitution, the more robust, tall, big boned. They have beautiful eyes, large eyes, beautiful hair. But yeah, really, honestly, they don't really have any like annoying qualities like Pitta and Vata do. They just don't like to move, and they tend to gain more weight because they're bigger people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But every Kapha person I've known, I just love. I had a spiritual teacher that was a Kapha, and they talk way, way slow, and they think about what they say before they say it. When I would speak to him, I would ask him questions, and it would take him 5 or 10 minutes to answer my questions. And so I would say, hey, did you hear what I asked you? And he was like, yeah, Wes, I did. I just haven't came up with the answer that I want to tell you. I was like, oh, okay. Because me being Vata, I was like, come on, you got to answer now. Come on. And he would just sit there and just kind of mull over and think about it and then answer it. And it was a way better answer than it would be if he would have answered in 2 seconds. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So Kapha people tend to be a little bit slower in that way, but the thought process is a lot different. So Vata person, they think quickly, you know, and they answer quickly. Pitta person, they have to run research on it. They have to do all this other stuff, and then they answer it, right? And then the Kapha person really, really thinks about it and then answers it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, those are great descriptions. Thanks for that. And just to kind of go down on this Constitution, Ayurvedic Constitution test, again, kind of like I did for Veda and Pitta, some of the qualities would be like thick, curly, oily, wavy, luxurious hair. Maybe it's thick, oily, smooth, polished nails, slow but steady, as we mentioned. And more like slow, exact, and sustained. Maybe you're having dreams about lake, snow, or romantic dreams. And I mean, it's in terms of emotions, what it has written down here is calm, greedy, attachment, but faith is consistent. So yeah, those are great definitions of each dosha, and I appreciate you kind of breaking it down like that. And so what's kind of your recommendation on discovering your Ayurvedic constitution? Because there's many tests out there and they all differ a little bit, but how can we really help listeners discover theirs? Is it to take multiple different tests and kind of see where you fall? Also, I know personally with myself, when I first took a test many years ago, I was towards the side of a Veda, Pitta, but more Veda. And I recently took a test and I was a lot more Pitta, barely any Veda. That kind of leads me on to my question of like, one, how can we help the audience discover theirs and what recommendations you have? But two, I know you said you're born with your dosha. However, how exactly does it kind of shift as we live our lives?
So there's several different ways to answer that. But the first, as far as the first step would be to have somebody that's close to you, maybe a sibling or a spouse or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, take the test for you. Because sometimes, a lot of times it's not that we're not being honest, but some of the things we might just not see at this moment, you know? So I think that's really helpful to do. Also, I mean, just kind of look back all your life on your physicality of how you were when you were younger. For example, I've always been skinny, and I've never, ever been kind of like, oh, all of a sudden I have like super wide shoulders or I'm like shrunk or something. You know, my physicality hasn't changed that much. But I have to say, as I get older, the Pitta starts to come out more in me. So my Vata tendencies are still there. I still talk fast and, you know, move fast and all those other things. I still am dry and cold and, you know, things like that. But the Pitta does come out occasionally, a lot more than it used to. And I think it's just because of the body changing and my age and things like that. But it also has to do with the seasons. So if you're predominantly Vata and winter comes out, it might throw you out of balance and you can't really see exactly where your Pitta is or your Kapha is. You might have some kind of imbalance because we all, even though we're one constitution, we have all three in us no matter what. So, but it's rare that somebody's all three because it's not built like that. So I would suggest to have somebody do the test for you, and then maybe every couple of years take it again just to see where you're at, and then kind of look around in the environment and see what's changed.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great tip in terms of getting a family or friend, somebody who knows you really well, to take the test for you and see how it compares to you taking the test, which might want to skew answers a little bit, and maybe unknowingly, but in terms of like kind of removing the bias from it and taking a few different tests and taking it over time, see how it changes and evolves in terms of your body. And also something that I noticed personally is like, while taking the test, I kind of had a little bit of between two doshas where it's like, maybe my body type's this and my hair, my nails, my skin. However, in terms of like emotions and other qualities such as my dreams and my faith, we're a different dosha. But exactly as you just said, I mean, it could be something that is imbalanced. It could be the seasons. It could be something that's kind of made you imbalanced and feel that you are developing qualities that are of another dosha. So it's kind of this push and pull. And I guess we're going to talk more about balance. But yeah, I mean, why do we first need to balance, find balance? And this is kind of the whole principle of Ayurvedic medicine. But also, how can we start recognizing that we are unbalanced and we need to kind of rein it back in?
So I would say probably without getting too much into the yoga philosophy and all that other stuff, I'm trying to think of ways to kind of like say it in layman's terms. And I would say probably with why we need to be in balance is so that we don't suffer. So we feel good and we don't have arthritis and we don't have allergies and we don't have these things in the future or even present. Also, too, it's just, it's uncomfortable sometimes just to kind of have an uncomfortable feeling and feeling, hey, I don't quite know what's going on today, but I just don't feel right, and that happens when you're not balancing all the things, for a Vata person, if you're cold and dry, everything that you need to do is the opposite of that. I have to tell a quick story because it's super funny. I have a lady that I love dearly that works for me at the studio. And I met her at a gym when I was teaching yoga full time and just kind of like trying to keep everything together and teaching all these classes. And I met her. She was a cancer survivor and a yoga student. And she came and worked for us at the studio as an assistant. So she cleans the studio. She does a lot of the finances and stuff like that. But she is the prime candidate for, she's a prime person for Pitta. She just, every time she gets embarrassed, she turns red. But the funny thing is when we opened the studio, she wanted to put water out for the students, which I thought was a great idea. But she put gallons of ice in there. Right, gallons of ice. Okay, and so I was like, okay, that's cool. Maybe she's just doing it this one time or whatever. And so, I mean, there was way more ice than there was water. It was just like, tons. And so after about a week or two, because I didn't know her really well, but after a while I was like, why are you putting ice, like all this ice in the water? Well, I know people get hot and all this other stuff. And it was like, no, she's super Pitta. She thinks everybody needs super cold water. I'm like, no, not everybody wants that, So she's like the prime Pitta person. It was just so funny. We joke about that all the time, but you'll see a lot of Pitta people, they want ice, I have to have ice. It's summertime. I have to have ice. But it's funny. So going back to balance in Vata. So since Vata is dry and cold, you want to start out with keeping the body in balance with simple techniques. For example, if say it's winter, you don't need to be going outside with shorts and t-shirt on, just you have to cover yourself and dress accordingly. You want to make sure that you get enough oil, and we'll talk about the daily rituals and stuff like that. but you need some kind of oil daily. I personally, as a Vata person, I get up and I do my thing. And then when I'm having coffee, I add either coconut oil or ghee. So I can have some kind of moisture for my Vata dryness. So you want to have, for a Vata person, you want to have topical oil and internal. And so as far as diet goes, since same thing, if you're cold and dry, you want to eat warming foods, cooked foods, not a lot of raw cold foods. So Vata needs opposite of what it is. Every dosha needs opposite of what it is. So also too, Vata person is very airy and gassy and needs stability in earthy foods. So it needs something that's going to be like baby food, that it's easy for them to digest. So soups and sweet potatoes and things that are very heavy that can hold that weight for them internally and externally. So anything that is warm and not dry. You don't want to eat popcorn, things like that. So, I mean, it's literally everything that you're opposite of. It's interesting to think of it that way. But it's weird how we crave particular foods that are not good for us. Like the Pitta person's always the person who wants spicy food, always. Because they know that for some reason in the system it says, I shouldn't have this, but I really want it, So anyway, so with the Vata, you just need to kind of nourish yourself with the opposite of what it is. Oil, warm. You don't want a lot of cold, raw foods. People are always talking about these new diets. I should go raw and all that stuff. Yes, you can go raw if you're a Pitta person. Pitta person is the only person who could probably hang with eating raw foods. Mm-hmm. Vata people can't. It's too much cold, too much raw, too much hard to digest. Mm-hmm. So salads for a Vata person every day is not good. But you can put a little bit of pepper on there to balance it out. So you always want to think about adding heated herbs to it to help it digest, to start the Agni, the fire. So again, finding everything you can to balance that particular dosha. So black pepper is amazing for Vata people. Cayenne does it, a little bit, but you just want herbs and spices that are a little bit heating. So that's Vata. Any questions? I'm sorry.
No, I think that's great. And that's in terms of some of like the physical qualities, the diet. And I love the story you had, because I think relationships is such a big part of this. And in terms of relationships, what I mean is, like, if your partner's a Vata and you're a Pitta, kind of knowing, like, just in that example, okay, that is their kind of quality, and being able to really understand your partner and that relationship, is if it's a friend, if it's a significant other or a family member, and being able to understand their general qualities, and also like finding things that work for you based on understanding these trends. But also, if you know your dosha, you kind of say like, oh, this is why this doesn't work for me. Let me try this. And it kind of better understand yourself, so then you could achieve the lifestyle that you would like to live, which is to make life beautiful, make a seemingly ordinary world extraordinary. And that's where kind of all this helps you better understand yourself, better understand your partners. Can we talk a little bit more about relationships in that?
So relationships, it's very, very important if you're going to get into Ayurveda to just like see who you're around and see how. I think oftentimes with relationships, people try to use Ayurveda to kind of change the other person. And you don't necessarily want to do that, but you can always find ways to help keep them in balance. Sarah's a Vata person. So if she's on the couch and she doesn't have a blanket, and I know she's a little chilly because she's Vata, then I will bring her a blanket and say, here, honey, here's the blanket that you can watch TV. You think of things that can nourish them without saying, hey, you need to be doing this, this, and this. It's not really equipped to do that, because some people don't know what doshas are and all that other stuff. And so I think it's important just kind of see who you're around and like communicate and relate and connect in that way because you know how they are. So if it's a Pitta person and you want to communicate with them and you're working with them, you want to go straight to the point. You want to give them the information that they need. With a Vata person, you can communicate in telling stories or even talking a lot. It's just like, there you go. Or Pitta people, they just want quick information, and it has to be factual and good. And that's it. You don't have to tell them stories. You don't have to do all this other stuff. You just you give it to them. And Kapha people, you just kind of sweetly say, hey, this, and this, what do you think? Kind of communicate in a sweet kind of manner. And so it's just kind of like seeing who's around you and kind of working with each other. And then think about yourself too. Like when I teach class, a lot of times, like, oh, I'm Vata, I need to slow down and teach this way instead of going the opposite and speeding up. It's funny because people really get irritated when I teach Ayurveda sometimes in the teacher training program for yoga, because Vata people don't need to be doing power yoga and all that other stuff. And they get upset because they're like, no, I want to. And I'm like, I know. You're supposed to balance out that. So you need a more earthly kind of grounding practice where you hold postures for long periods of time. A Pitta person needs something that's not so serious, right? That's all, dances around and makes it a little bit more flowing and fun, because Pitta people don't like that. They want something strict and regimented. And Kapha people, they don't like to move. So power yoga, Ashtanga, all those things are great for them, So it just kind of depends.
And something with that is something that I learned as a yoga teacher and was taught was like, give them a little bit what they want, but then give them what they need. So they still keep coming back, but in the sense of like knowing what your students need and knowing what you need and adjusting your schedule. Like you could give yourself a little bit of what you want, but also recognize what you need to ultimately balance yourself out. And that's something I really kind of integrated into my own yoga practice and breathing practice, and just recognizing that, hey, I need to like calm down a little bit. I'm always activated. I'm always on. And you just need to kind of sit down, take a longer shavasana, sometimes do those slow, more yin style, restorative style classes. And although it's the last thing I want to be doing, I want to go, it feels so much better in the long run. And it's really kind of changed the way and the productivity that I've been able to kind of put out, like stuff like working on the show and other things that I work on. Like I don't think I would have been able to keep up the schedule that I'm keeping up now if I didn't kind of recognize that I need to find this balance, and Ayurveda kind of helped me with that.
It's interesting too, because you can also, as a yoga teacher, you can look out in the audience of your you can also look outside in general public of who you're teaching in the yoga class and say, who am I teaching for? And most of the time, you'll see it's the people who, for example, a lot of Kapha people are not going to be there because they don't like to move, So you're teaching for Vatas and Pittas mainly. And so it makes it easier as a teacher, because you're like, okay, I need to be doing a particular practice for them to help them balance. I don't always need to be doing something fast and hard, It's something that needs to be therapeutic and grounding for these people, so they can feel better after class. They might hate you at the time, but then after class, they're like, yes, that was the best,
Yeah.
So we talked about how we should use this, and as a yoga teacher, you should use it for that reason.
And back to the relationships and back to kind of the other two doshas, Vata and Kapha. I guess we could jump back into relationships. I cut you off there, but I just felt I should state that, because I think everybody should kind of recognize that you're going to want something, and you're going to feel that you need, say, to be more activated, and you're a Vata, but in reality, just kind of recognize that's kind of your Vata speaking, and recognize that, hey, maybe it's something that I need to be doing is more calming.
Yeah, I think I covered most of what I was going to say about relationships. I think it's just like looking and seeing who you're around, and kind of like who you're talking to and communicating to, and kind of understanding where they're coming from, because you'll understand the doshas,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's pretty much it. But it's interesting to look at, your partner or your child or, a teacher or whatever, and just kind of like, oh, okay, this is how they work. This is how they are, and not get upset when a Pitta person says something rude. And they don't mean to be rude. It's not personal. It's just that's how they communicate. And so you just kind of understand who it is and don't take it personally. So I think that's kind of sums it up with the relationship.
Yeah, and definitely. And a few things I had in my notes on Vata back from some like courses I've taken is that kind of to know that your Vata is out of balance, you might be things like anxiety, nervousness, lonely or depressed, jittery, excess talking, weight loss, dry skin, dehydration, and crackling joints. And so that's excess Vata. And too little Vata is like sluggish, lazy, kind of suffering from confusion or lack of enthusiasm. So Vata imbalances can lead to things over the long term. I mean, such as like mental imbalances or mental diseases, but also knowing that there's things that you could incorporate into your lifestyle to correct a Vata imbalance. And that might be routine, I have written down. Avoid becoming too chilled. So make sure you're staying warm, you're eating warm foods. Get to bed before 10, awake before 6, exercise moderately, not too much in excess, practice slowing down, meditation, give and receive touch from loved ones. And as we spoke about, like your asana or your yoga practice, it's like calming, slow, steady. And I think that does a good job of summing it up. I mean, let's go to Pitta.
Yeah, sure. So a Pitta person in balance I would say probably the best thing that they can do is cooling off a lot of times. I would say probably cooling foods most of the time. A lot of times in Ayurveda, they suggest having, cooked meals at least once a day, but it's okay for Pitta people to eat a cooling diet. Even if you want to add a little bit, even more cooling stuff to your diet, add things like aloe vera juice, something that's really cooling that can help digest and kind of put out that fire in your belly. Doing things that are kind of not so routine, because Pitta people are opposite of Vata. They love schedule. Everything has to be a certain way. So being spontaneous and going to do something at the last minute or going to dance, they don't like to do that. So going to do things that are very spontaneous is great for a Pitta person. And also just not reading and doing things that are so heavy. So that's maybe some poetry or maybe something that kind of gets them out of their head and more into their heart. So because it tends to be that a Pitta person likes to really learn and all kinds of knowledge and stuff like that. So anyway, just kind of getting out of the head a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
With and going swimming and just doing pranayamas, breath techniques that cool off the body. And Pitta person is pretty easy to balance just because they're so intellectual and they can kind of figure out what to do to cool themselves off. So they tend not to be so imbalanced, not like Vata people do. So
yeah, and something that I know from like when you have like a very high Pitta, you're highly critical, you kind of and judge yourself mentally, and maybe you might be quite harsh on yourself, and aversion to heat because you're this hot body type. But in terms of like imbalances, I mean, that could be acne, hormonal irregulations, hyperacidity, inflammation diseases. I mean, I think that sums it up pretty well.
Pitta people tend to have a lot of skin issues too. So it's really good to make sure that they take care of their skin. Just because that's where the inflammation comes from is usually the skin. So they have rashes, heat rashes, and, things like that. Tend to have heartburn, like you said, different kind of acidic diseases and stuff like that. So just the heat kind of takes over the body, basically. So, yeah, Pitta seems to be a little bit easier to kind of balance out.
Yeah. Unless you do hot yoga.
Yes. Yes. So Kapha, basically with Kapha is they're pretty balanced human beings, but they just have to get moving. They just have to move. That's one of the things. They just don't want to move at all. But getting them into a fast class, a hard class, something, running, something that has to do with moving, even, 2 walks a day or some kind of exercise. But as far as immunity and all that other stuff, they're really pretty solid people.
Yeah, definitely. And just back to like a couple things I had in my notes was that like a high kapha might be imbalance manifest as like excess sleeping, asthma, diabetes, depression. However, too little kapha might be signs of vata increase, like crackling joints or dryness. But kapha imbalances can lead to depression, obesity, diabetes, heart disease. So it's just things to kind of rope it back in, like we've been talking about the whole time, which is like some tips, lifestyle tips would be follow a regular daily routine, maybe eliminate clutter from the house, the car, the office, stay warm and avoid dampness. Yeah, make sure to wake up by 6 a.m. and always kind of perform like a regular dynamic exercise practice, ideally every day, or like we spoke, maybe even twice a day to stimulate some moving. And in terms of like asanas or yoga practices, that could mean like very vigorous practice that might be more sun salutations or chaturangas, and or we mentioned like ashtanga practice. And actually we didn't mention that in Pitta, but in Pitta some of the practices in terms of asana or the yoga practices would be something that's more of cooling and more say like standing hip openers, tree pose, or it's like seated poses at the also. So yeah, I think that's a good way to sum up the 3 doshas in the constitutions. And of course, like we said, there's tons of information online and resources. I'll link to some in the show notes below. Is there any other resources you would recommend in terms of learning more about Ayurvedic?
I would recommend there's Dr. Ladd's website is pretty amazing. He's one of the most popular Ayurvedic physicians in the world, and he's based out of New Mexico. His website is www.ayurvedainstitute.org, and he has things that you can buy and dosha test and books and things like that. Another practitioner that I really, really think is amazing is a guy named Robert Sabota. He wrote tons of books, but he's the first American guy, or the only American guy really, that graduated at Ayurvedic college in India. He had to learn Hindi and Sanskrit and all that stuff before he could even go to college, but he went to a 7-year program, and he is just amazing storyteller, great books, very simple treatments, really gets the Westerner to understand what Ayurveda is. So again, his name is Robert Sabota. I really enjoy
Awesome.
him.
Yeah, I'll link to those in the show notes, and everyone definitely check that out if you're interested in learning more about Ayurvedic. In terms of Ayurvedic and incorporating it into your daily routine, is there anything else we should know before we jump into some audience questions?
Yeah, so I was quickly going to go through the general daily Ayurvedic routine.
Yeah, definitely.
And basically, most of this is done in the morning. Some people like to kind of separate it in 2 days. And this is straight from the strict text. So it could be tweaked a little bit, because a lot of people in Austin, you're probably going to say, well, I don't do it in that order. Why don't we do it this way? And so we can tweak it a little bit. Just remember this before I go through. It's changed a little bit, because now in Ayurveda, they say the tongue has to be scraped and all this stuff has to be done. Your teeth have to be brushed before you even have a glass of water or warm water with lemon or anything like that, because it makes sense if you think about this. If you drink water or something like that, all the toxins are going to go back into your system, and you don't want that. You want to get rid of the toxins and then generate good something cleansing water or something like that. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood that part. So the first thing is, if Ayurveda could have it, we'd wake up before the sun rises. That's supposed to be the creator's hour. That's when all the creativity and all the energy is and all that. Like, that's the spiritual time. So upon rising, drink warm lemon water. And that's, everybody's heard that. It really gets the body moving, gets rid of the toxins that you generate in all throughout the night. Second one would be eliminate. So you would use the bathroom because you drank the warm water. And so it's trying to get your body on a schedule. So you kind of like have a regular schedule. And the next one, it's kind of funny because this particular one has been around for thousands of years, and we're just starting to do research, but oil pulling. And that's when you take a tablespoon of oil, usually something that's going to be like a kind of natural good oil, like sesame oil or coconut oil or something that's good for you, about a tablespoon, and you just swish it around in your mouth for about 10 minutes. And what it does is it tricks the body to thinking that you're eating food, and all the toxins and stuff go in the oil, and then you spit it out. I usually, in talking about changing up the order, I usually do this while I'm in the shower. So that way you can kind of like waste 10 minutes and not just kind of walk around, because it's hard to like communicate and do all that with
yeah I can imagine. I actually have yet to try it, so I got to try it. I'm actually allergic to coconut, so maybe like a sesame oil
or sunflower oil or something like that. So you could find real oil.
Yeah.
But another tip for that: don't spit it in the shower or the sink. Put it in the trash can, because it'll eventually, if you start putting everyday oil down your shower, it'll tend to get stopped up. And then after that, you scrape your tongue. So there's a lot of products out there that are plastic, I would say, use. In India, they use copper or stainless steel. So you can buy them. We have them at the studio. You can order them anywhere. I mean, basically. But make sure you get that, or copper's fine, whatever. And so after you scrape your tongue, you just rinse it off. Maybe once a month, I clean it real good because it's a lot of toxins on there. Brush your teeth with clean toothpaste. Fluoride's always a debate or a conversation, but I suggest no fluoride. But if you want fluoride, it's fine. Just make sure that the toothpaste is halfway clean. A lot of times they have these cool charcoal toothbrushes that are really good, that kind of whiten the teeth and all this other stuff. So those are always recommended. And then with a little bit of oil after that, maybe on your finger, a little drop of sesame oil or something, and massage the gums. So, the gums don't get a lot of nourishment except for aggressive teeth brushing, so it's nice to massage the gums a little bit. Plus, sesame oil in Ayurveda is the most therapeutic oil. It actually gets in the tissues, and it's very, very good for you. And not the roasted sesame oil, just the regular sesame oil. Okay, and then the next one is apply cool water to the eyes. So you just want to keep the eyes open and just kind of splash, just to detox the eyes a little bit. Because a lot of times we don't really give them much nourishment, because a lot of times in the shower, you just close your eyes. If you put your face in there, you don't really get your eyes wet and cleansed. Mm-hmm. So that's a good way to do it. And everybody's heard of this. The neti pot is next. The neti pot's very popular, and some people either love it or hate it. But
what is that actually? I haven't heard of that. The neti pot.
Yeah. So the neti pot is they have different ones. There's plastic, silicone, all kinds. But you use a concoction of clean salt. A lot of times, pink salt and water. Some people add baking soda. But you literally have it here, and you tilt your head, and you put it through this nostril, and the water comes out the other nostril.
Okay, I have heard of that actually.
Yeah. And it's been around for a long time. And then a thing called Nasya oil is a nasal oil, and you just put a little drop in there. And again, you can buy fancy oils that you can put in your nose, or you can just get a sesame oil and put a little drop in there. It just moisturizes the nose and keeps the sinuses lubricated and all that. So. And then I've got a little bit more. The next one would be a dry brush. And that's supposed to get all the dead skin off and help with circulation, and you always do the brush towards the heart. And then, so you can either do this in the shower or outside the shower. I would suggest to do it in the shower, but it's called Abhyanga. It's it's the oil massage. Mm-hmm. And I usually have a little squirt bottle where I squirt on my shoulders and then just massage from head to toe. And, a lot of times people, they say they just kind of like rub it on their skin, but I suggest to massage, 5-10 minutes and really get behind your ears and do massage and make sure the oil gets in good places. So.
Awesome.
And then the next one is obviously take a bath or shower. And then it would be apply powder or lotion, something that's clean and natural. Then apply fresh fragrance, which means, essential oils or a clean perfume or cologne or something. And then dress in clean, comfortable clothes. And the last two are important. Meditate and do your pranayama practice, asana practice, and a brisk walk. So since this being so old school, they didn't really have, India yoga is a little bit different. And so it wasn't a lot of hot, sweaty people, and all this stuff. So that was the last thing they did. Now in America, it might be the opposite. You might want to do your asana practice first and then go through the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. But those are great tips. Thank you for sharing those. And it's definitely old school in terms of like they didn't have email, social media, getting hit with messages from every direction, but it's definitely a good foundation to kind of build your routine off of, and starting to incorporate some of the Ayurvedic principles into your daily life.
It's very preventative and very mindful to do. If you think about, the things that you're doing, lubricating the nostrils, doing all this stuff, irrigating the sinus cavities. I mean, all this stuff that you could do to prevent a cold or flu or, something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Just constantly thinking that way.
Cool. Yeah. And was there anything else before we dive into audience questions?
Yes. And then it basically kind of tells you, okay, you need to eat the lightest meal in the evening and the heaviest meal in the afternoon. So lunchtime should be, which is a crazy thing for us Americans to think of, but the heaviest meal should be at lunchtime. Because we mentioned the Agni, the fire of the digestive system, is more prominent, just like the sun. Same thing. Noon, it's super sunny. Digestive system, super fiery and ready to digest. Cool. At night, same thing. The moon starts to come out, and then everything cools down, all that. So you want more of a lighter meal, soup, a little bit of rice, whatever. So make sure that you're, doing your heaviest meal during the day. Raw foods should be probably during the day, and cooked foods definitely at night. Just stuff like that.
Cool. And this is some principles that you personally follow, you and yourself and Sarah?
Yes. So nice. We intermediate fast, so we only eat 2 meals a day. Heaviest meal in the day, and nighttime light meal.
Nice.
Make sure there's room for digestion, so we don't snack or eat in between that. So.
Cool. Yeah. And a couple of audience questions. I mean, one of them was, can your Ayurvedic Constitution change over time? We discussed this a little bit, but you mentioned that you're born with this Ayurvedic Constitution and it just kind of becomes unbalanced and you have to kind of constantly be working to correct it. What's your opinion on this question?
I think exactly what you said, because it tends what I see a lot of times is as we age, the other doshas start to kind of leak in and unbalanced. So I think to suggest to keep the balance in the body is to always find out, if you don't know already, what your main constitution is and keep that balance. Because if you keep that particular dosha balance, the other ones won't go into imbalance. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would recommend.
Awesome. And this is kind of a given what we've been speaking about the whole time, but can following a Ayurvedic diet help me with digestion issues and lose weight?
Yes. So if you're eating things that, for example, if you're a Vata person and you're constantly eating cold foods and you're constantly stacking foods and not letting meals digest in between meals, like you're eating every 2 hours or something like that, it tends to build toxins where your stomach starts to kind of get out of balance. And when Vata, especially Vata, when their belly gets in balance, it starts to gain a little bit of weight and do all this other stuff. Same with each dosha. So if you're constantly eating foods that you're not supposed to be eating for your dosha, it starts to produce toxins and you start to gain weight a little bit. So I would suggest, Ayurveda is about cleansing and balancing and all this other stuff, but I would recommend kind of like homing in on what your dosha is and just eating lightly and not really snacking in between meals, and maybe drink some hot tea if you want to or something like that. So kind of give yourself a schedule, what you're going to eat and when you're going to eat.
Yeah.
I think that'll help.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny how some of those tips that we're talking about in Ayurveda have been integrated in kind of other diets now we're seeing now, such as like intermittent fasting, like we were mentioning, the keto diet, the paleo diet, all these popular diets. And it's like they're kind of, a lot of them are built off of these Ayurvedic principles. And somebody that I listen to is Ben Pakulski. He's kind of call him a yogi bodybuilder, but he always says that it's not so much what you eat, it's what you digest. So if you could digest it, you're able to utilize nutrients and get the benefits from your food. So question 3, I've heard hot yoga is an Ayurveda nightmare, yet I love it so much. What is your opinion on it?
So I'm kind of biased because at our studio, we don't have any hot yoga. I don't really necessarily have anything against hot yoga. I just think that particular doshas should do it and some shouldn't do it. I think if you're maybe a Pitta person or a Vata person, you really, really like it, I think it's okay to be doing it, 2 or 3 times a week and then have some kind of therapeutic thing. Or if you're like, no, be quiet, Wes, I don't want to do that. Do it 5 days a week and then have yin for 2 days. Something that's very cooling and just super chill,
Yeah.
So I would kind of break it up and not do 7 days a week of, more than likely this person, no offense at all, you're either probably a Pitta or a Vata person. You're like, come on, let's do this. I love this. And so I would say just kind of break it up a little bit, have therapeutic and then have what you want.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that's great advice. I love asking yoga teachers their opinion on hot yoga because you get those yoga teachers that teach in, say, a studio that's not hot and one that's hot, and there's mixed. Personally, I love hot yoga like a couple days a week. And after that, it really drains me after that. But that's my own personal experience and for my doshas. So find what works for you and see how you feel either way. I was always taught to twist from right to left. Is there any reason for this in terms of Ayurveda?
People always ask that a lot, and there's several different reasons. I can't remember all the reasons, but we have to remember that Ayurveda comes from an Indian background, which comes from that particular background comes from a Hindu background. And a lot of things that they do, they start out with the right. So if you go into a temple, you always go right to left. You don't go left to right. Also, when you roll over on your right side, there's less things to crush, and it's okay to sleep on that particular side. You don't want to do it on the opposite side, from my understanding. But it has a lot to do with just tradition, how it's been done for so long. And the reason in the Marma points and all this other stuff of why you're going to the right is because there's less things to crush than over to the left. It just seems to be a little bit more sattvic for the body than the left side.
Cool. And where can one find an Ayurvedic practitioner? Also, are there any resources you would recommend for those who are trying to find out, which we discussed more about Ayurveda, but I guess in terms of this question, really, where can we find an Ayurvedic practitioner?
So I would suggest there's a lot of people who practice Ayurveda, but they're not like certified practitioners, and I myself am not. But I do consultations through my my privates and stuff like that. You can always contact me personally. I don't work with, critically ill people and stuff like that. I'd much rather have somebody who has way more training than me. But you can always contact me, or David Frawley is really a respected Ayurvedic person. And also a guy named David Crow with an E. He does acupuncture and Ayurveda. But Frawley has people on staff that will do like Zoom calls and, all this other stuff, because I don't really know where everybody is. I'm sure you could probably find a list in your state, but I would probably communicate with the Frawley people and see, what they have, because they have the best practitioners in the world. So.
Awesome. I think that's a great recommendation. I'll include their website in the show notes below. And Wesley, what's next for you and the Arkansas Yoga Collective, and where can people follow the amazing work you do?
I actually have a bunch of projects always. I just put out a book, so
nice.
About a month ago, and it's called Wellness Yoga, and it's a therapeutic sequence for shoulders and wrist, because a lot of times in yoga we don't stretch those and condition those. And we're always using our shoulders, so it's some therapeutic stuff for shoulders. I'm working on yoga therapy right now, so that's where I want to go in the future, maybe even work in a hospital. My background is working with cancer patients and teaching them, so I really love that. With the studio, we're doing 200-hour and 300-hour. And we're just enjoying doing that. COVID has kind of like slowed things down a little bit, but we're still doing, if you want to become a yoga teacher, we're doing stuff on Zoom too. We just did a teachables thing that you can learn philosophy of yoga, all kinds of stuff about yoga. And it's on this teachable programs. And Austin, I can give it to you so you can share with them.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll include that in the show notes.
My favorite thing to do with the studio and with the students is we go to India every year, and we go in a place called Rishikesh, and it's like the nectar of yoga. And so we travel around for about 2.5 weeks, and I show you the ropes, and we stay in cool places and learn about traditional yoga. So
awesome. That sounds amazing. Yeah.
6 years. So we can't go this year, but we'll hopefully be able to go. And I have a website. It's easy. It's just wesleypilcher.com. And then we have our arkansasyogacollective.com as well. So
awesome. Wesley, I appreciate so much for you being on the show, and for everyone listening. If you like this episode, make sure to share it with at least one person who needs it most. Make sure to subscribe and leave a written review and rating wherever you're listening to right now. It's greatly appreciated. And also make sure to visit www.secretyogisociety.com for weekly updates. I appreciate Wesley so much for jumping on the show today and talking about Ayurveda.
Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for being here. I am truly grateful for your time, and all of you have taken part in the Secret Yogi Society to make life beautiful through bringing together a community of like-minded individuals to go about life's journey together. I appreciate you all that have left a rating and review in whichever platform you're listening to this episode right now. So if you haven't left a rating or review thus far, if you could please do so. Your reviews help push this show further and in turn directly support all those who have joined the Secret Yogi Society. For more information on the Secret Yogi Society, check out our hub, which is www.secretyogisociety.com. From there, you can find all the links to our Facebook group, where we are constantly supporting each other as a community and discussing the latest episodes, our Instagram, where we have short, thoughtful quotes and reflections from recent guests, and finally, our newsletter, which is a list of upcoming events, free live yoga classes, and meditations, and a lot more. So all this will be in the show notes below, and have an amazing day. Namaste.